many times people who have gone untreated for a long period of time with ADHD do feel very anxious, or they do feel very depressed because they've been trying so hard to keep up with life or comparing themselves to other people. Why am I like this? Why do I handle things this way? Why do I forget? Why do I react this way? And it causes a lot of, I really think that it causes a fractured self-esteem, but in itself, it can cause depression. And so many times if we can treat the ADHD, the anxiety and the depression will go away on its own.
ADHD is one of the most misunderstood conditions out there. Misdiagnosis is common, treatments often miss the mark, and emotional symptoms like rejection sensitivity are rarely ever mentioned. Today I'm speaking to Jheri South, a behavioural coach, ADHD expert, and the mother of 7 neurodivergent kids, who wasn't diagnosed until her 40s. She breaks down why so many people get overlooked or mislabeled, what rejection sensitivity dysphoria actually feels like, and how you can take clear practical steps to better understand your brain and take back control. Welcome to Move Your Mind, where we uncover why you are holding yourself back from getting the life you want and what to do about it. With the help from high-achieving guests and experts in behavioural science, personal development, and the health and wellness space. Join us if you're ready to move out of your own way toward your ideal self. I'm your host, nickbracks, and I've been working in the health and wellness space for the last 15 years, helping people find direction and gain the courage to take control of their life. My mission is simple: to help you learn everything that I wish I knew, so you can become your ideal self. Lacking guidance, I spent the majority of my youth feeling lost and disempowered, which led to depression, anxiety, low self-esteem, and substance abuse. Looking back, I didn't have the vocabulary to communicate what I was experiencing. And as a man, I didn't resonate with the emotional language used in traditional therapy. I didn't need to talk about my feelings. I needed tangible solutions to guide me toward building a life I was proud of. If you can relate, then this podcast is for you. In this episode, we discuss why ADHD is so misunderstood and what actually works. If you're ready to take action and build a stronger mindset, then keep listening. Jheri, so great to meet you, and thank you for making the time to come on the podcast.
Oh, I'm happy to be here. Really excited to talk about ADHD.
Yeah, I mean, we were just chatting before we recorded, and I think we had to stop talking because I have this happen often with the podcast where, you know, you're discussing, you're getting to know each other, saying what you'll talk about, but then that can go, if you don't stop, it's like, oh, we should just record this because there's just so much to discuss. And especially with your work, I mean, it's such a complicated area, and I mean, I'm going to have to be strategic, I think, with what we do and don't talk about because we only do have so much time. But yeah, I came across you on social media and was really fascinated by the work you're doing. So yeah, appreciate you coming on and making that time. So I guess to begin with, just so our audience can get to know you a little bit better, can you give a background on yourself and the work you do?
Absolutely. So yeah, my name is Jheri South. I actually live in Arizona, but I work with clients all over, not even just in the US, outside the US as well. I'm a behavioral coach, and I focus primarily on neurodivergent individuals, and consider myself to be an expert of ADHD. Was diagnosed with ADHD later in life, in my 40s. I also have 7 neurodivergent children. So of the 7, 4 of them are on the autism spectrum and 6 of them have ADHD, and have a spouse who's neurodivergent as well. I got into this work originally because I wanted to help other people who had, maybe gone through the same things that I had gone through. I'd gone through a divorce. I experienced rejection sensitivity dysphoria in an extreme way. It really affected my life. And once I felt that I was, just doing a lot better, I wanted to really work with others. And as I was doing that, I had some trouble with my own children. And that's when I really went down this ADHD rabbit hole, if you will. I started to connect with doctors like Dr. William Dodson, who I consider to be one of the most he's really, I think, one of the best ADHD doctors in the United States. He really knows what he's doing. And so I had the opportunity to sit down with him in his home and learn from him and other experts as well, so that I could understand more about what I had been going through, what I knew and what I didn't actually know, and each one of my 7 children was presenting so differently. We thought maybe there were different things going on with them. And it turns out most of what they were experiencing were symptoms that really came from their ADHD. Sometimes ADHD can be so extreme that it can look like bipolar disorder. So trying to help my own children and then making it my mission to help other families and bring awareness to how to understand your very unique neurological system, and then how to really create an owner's manual for that neurological system so that you can learn to overcome your debilitating symptoms and use ADHD as a superpower. So now I work one-on-one behavioral coaching with my clients every day. I have an online course. I do lots of different things to help ADHDers and give them the resources that they're looking for. Because honestly, let's face it, there's also a lot of misinformation out there. It's hard to get real help for ADHD.
Yeah, it's a minefield. It's like it's so complicated because there's, I think it's hard to decipher who actually does have it, who doesn't, what's going on. The stuff you're saying there about, it looks similar to even bipolar. And I was telling you before we started recording on my own journey, I'm 38 years old now, and I had seen therapists, all my life. I was doing all of these different things, exercising every day, keeping a routine, things that made me feel stable. But I thought something's not right. And literally no one's telling me, and I'm pleading with them saying, hey, I don't care what it is, just there's got to be more. What's going on here? No one could tell me that until my current partner, who has ADHD herself, she's a neuroscientist, and essentially not 6 months in, probably 3 months into the relationship, she started to really see what I was like every day, my mood changing, 500 times a day, up, down, all over the place. And she sort of looked at me and said, look, if you don't fucking have ADHD, I'll be shocked, because you're worse than most of the people that I've met that have it. And I went and got tested for it, found out I had it, eventually got medicated, and started really prioritizing, other things like sleep and all these different things. And it just changed everything. It was crazy. And it opened my eyes to just how undereducated we are and how complicated it is. So I think it's crazy.
Absolutely. I mean, that's one of the things, and that's really my mission now. I'm as quickly as I can training other coaches to work on my practice, because I think we're not doing a good job in the mental health industry just in general, but especially with neurodivergent individuals. The statistics are, I think it's like 93% of psychiatrists don't know how to properly treat ADHD. 50% of pediatricians say that they wouldn't even know how to evaluate somebody for ADHD. So we have, and I'm not trying to knock doctors. We have great doctors out there, but the majority of them are not required to spend any time studying ADHD. So, it's like I have clients coming in here and they're being treated for ADHD and they're being put on Wellbutrin. And if you Google it, it says Wellbutrin is, used to treat ADHD. It's not. It's a mood stabilizer. So yeah, you'll feel better, but it's not doing anything for your ADHD symptoms. And these kinds of things are happening every day with my clients. And I'm just in this, one area. That's probably the thing I struggle with the most. I have more clients out of Arizona than I do in Arizona, because I do work with clients in person, but also the majority of the time online. Is they want resources for who they can see. How do they get properly evaluated? Because we have, misdiagnoses going on so often as well. And many times they're being misdiagnosed with other things, anxiety disorder, depression, bipolar disorder, when really they have ADHD. So it's like, we don't have enough resources. I'm spending a lot of my extra time calling, other states, trying to figure out where are the best places to get evaluated, who knows ADHD and who doesn't. So if anyone's trying to figure out where to start, we don't just want to go to anybody. That's my experience. You want to find somebody who specializes in ADHD. If you're looking to get medicated, specializes in ADHD medication. And sometimes you have to search far and wide to find that person who's really going to know how to treat you properly.
Absolutely. And, in Australia, it's horrific, because even to see a psychiatrist who you have to get an appointment with a psychiatrist to be able to get prescribed medication. And it takes literally 6 months to a year or longer, because it's so overbooked. And I've got a friend who went and got tested, and he, this guy needs help. And they said, yeah, you've got ADHD. You need to be medicated. You need to get help for this, and he's waiting for over a year to get an appointment. And it's just like, I was talking to him about it, like, mate, is there anything else you can do? Because that's just not acceptable. Like, it's not fair. Like, this guy needs the support and he doesn't know what else to do.
Well, absolutely. Absolutely. And just, we can, I don't know if this is a good place to make a plug, but actually I hear this a lot. Outside of the United States, there's people that feel like they have ADHD and they've been told, no, you don't, or they're still waiting and their appointment is a year out. So specifically for those people who have reached out to me, I thought, okay, this is a bigger issue outside of the United States. I put together an ADHD test. I just use the questions right from evaluations that other specialists that I know use in their evaluations. And I put it all together and I offer it for free, just so you know. So if there's somebody out there who feels like they might have ADHD, they can jump on there, take the test, and it's pretty accurate.
Incredible. And
it's not a diagnosis, obviously. I can't do that, but it just gives you a good idea of where you stand there.
Is that something we could share with the listeners? I could put in the show notes a link to it if they wanted to do that test.
Absolutely. Yep. I'll provide you the link and they can just click on it. I mean, there's no strings attached. You can just jump on there and take the test. Just for peace of mind, if you have to wait that long, because people want to know. Most people I've talked to have been now looking into this for a while, and they've been told lots of different things. And that's the part that drives me crazy, is that many times they are put on other medications for a long time, or they are walking around believing that they're just depressed or they have anxiety. And they could, one thing that's important to understand is that if you have ADHD, there's a 60% likelihood that you will have a comorbid condition. So it's more likely that you will have something else than that you won't, right? And if anyone doesn't know, a comorbid condition is just another diagnosis. It could be autism, which, by the way, is very common with ADHD. It could be an anxiety disorder. It could be OCD. It could be depression. But many times, people who have gone untreated for a long period of time with ADHD do feel very anxious, or they do feel very depressed because they've been trying so hard to keep up with life, or comparing themselves to other people. Why am I like this? Why do I handle things this way? Why do I forget? Why do I react this way? And it causes a lot of, I really think that it causes a fractured self-esteem. But in itself, it can cause depression. And so many times, if we can treat the ADHD, the anxiety and the depression will go away on its own.
Oh, God. Yeah. It's just like, I'll try not to talk too much about myself in this, but it's just, everything you're saying, I think it's a good way for me to, use real examples to paint this picture. But it's so overwhelming and so frustrating and so tricky, because as you're saying there, the anxiety can go through the roof, and then you might think, is it OCD? Is it anxiety? Is it this? Is it that? And maybe it could be, but you don't know. But until you can get to the core and, like you said, start just managing that, a lot of them will go away. And that's what happened for me. And I was anxious to the point where I couldn't, my mind was so out of control that the only way I felt safe, I guess, was to just feel, to want to control the environment around me. And, something like packing a bag to go on a trip overseas, I couldn't do it. So I had to do all these tricks with myself where, even if I was going away for a 3-month trip, I would wait until the morning of the flight. I'd wake up and I would have to just shove stuff in my bag, otherwise I'd miss the flight. And I would do that because I knew if I tried to plan ahead, I'd be panicking. I'd be, literally becoming disabled. And that would happen even like when I was starting the podcast, trying to buy a microphone, going between which one do I get? What if I get the wrong one? This, that, the other, and to a point where it became debilitating. I was like, this is crazy. Looking back now, I can't believe I was like that, but I also get that it was happening. And it's just, until we can actually get to, start looking after the core issue that's going on, we can't really understand where everything else is coming from.
Right. And that's the thing. When that was happening for you, you didn't know that you had ADHD at that time, right?
I didn't know.
So what did you think about yourself? That's the question. It's like, what were you?
I thought, what the fuck's wrong with me? Yeah.
Exactly. That's my point. It's like terrible feeling to think that something like, am I crazy? What is actually wrong with me?
Oh, yeah. There's some self-hatred. I started, and all the things you're saying, be comparing myself to people. And I was over, I've always been overly ambitious. And I think a lot of it came from an overcompensation because I never felt right. It's like, okay, if I can just do all of this stuff, maybe Or if I make enough money, that's another thing that I've got a problem with to this day. I had an attachment to money, and no matter how much I had saved in my bank account, I never felt safe, because I think I felt that I was so unstable mentally myself that I don't know if I'll be able to sustain anything. So as long as I have enough money, then I can feel protected, that I won't be left, with nothing, and people won't abandon me, and all these different things. And, things that, take a long time to unpack. And like I said, to this day, still bother me. But a lot of it, was just stemming from all of those things. But yeah, you're telling yourself, like, all those voices that I'm trying to still remind myself aren't true of, what's wrong with me? Why am I so pathetic? Why the fuck am I so, like, what the hell's going on? Like, why do I find everything so hard? And your self-esteem plummets, because you just feel like there's something innately wrong, and you're like, I'm not meant for this world. Like, something's not right. And it's it's shocking.
Well, if you think about it, I mean, to have self-confidence, to really believe in yourself and trust in yourself, uh, you really need to be showing up consistently in every area of your life for the most part. I mean, we're human, right? But you need to be consistent. That means in your relationships, at work, in your personal goals. If you're showing up consistently for life and you're trusting yourself to do that, there's a lot of self-confidence that's gained from that, right? Keeping promises to yourself and things like that. But if you're not, and this is the ADHD, issue right here, this is where we really start to spiral, is that we hyper focus and we're amazing and we get things done, right? And it's like, wow. And then the next day we can't do that again. And most ADHDers don't know why that is. Why could I get this done before? Why was I just a rock star when it came to this project? But then when it comes to this other thing, I cannot get started. Where most ADHDers are terrible at self-appraisal. And if I say that online, people just really don't like that, but it's true. We might be doing the same thing over and over again and not able to stop the cycle, or not understand what we need to do to disrupt the cycle to get to a different place, right? Or be unaware that we're even doing it in the first place. And so we don't show up consistently. It's like sometimes we do, sometimes we don't. We get to the point where we don't trust ourselves. Like, hopefully I'll come through. Hopefully I can do that. Hopefully I can manage my RSD. And that creates a fragile self-esteem. And I think really that's where the all of the depression, anxiety, the feelings really come from in ADHD, is just not being able to trust yourself to show up every day consistently, and watching other people who are. It's really hard, the comparison.
It's a helplessness that comes from it, and it makes sense, and I'm just, it really hits home and makes me feel emotional, because I just know what it feels like. I know the feeling of being stuck like that. And if I stayed like that for the rest of my life, I don't think I could cope. Like, I would just break down. Like, I mean, because I think even if life's a struggle, the one thing that normally gets you through is having hope. But then if you're going through the same motions all the time, like they say, if insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and getting the same result, not changing it. So it's like, if that happens, at some point you are going to crack. And it's so sad, because I think so many people are stuck in that cycle and probably don't get out of it, because it's a vicious cycle and you don't know how to get out of it, and it just reinforces all of these negative things. So, I mean, like, that's a question I think that would be important for anyone listening. If you are stuck in that cycle, and maybe it's not even to do with ADHD, but especially with ADHD, if you're stuck in that, what would you say would be a first step you can do to try and get the support you need and make the change?
For getting the help that you need for treatment, like how to get out of the cycle of just not knowing where to go and what to do.
Yeah.
So, I know that this is the work I do, so of course I'm going to say it's so important, but I really believe that it's important to let my audience know that I walked away from a job that was, I was really a high performer where I was. It was a step down initially to do the work that I'm doing. And I'm doing it, or I initially started doing it because it changed my life. It changed my life. And I just want to put out there, I think that there's amazing therapists and counselors out there. So it's not to say that there aren't. But the difference for me, the transformation when I did behavioral coaching versus traditional therapy is night and day. And I really think when it comes to neurodivergent individuals, behavioral coaching is really the way to go, just because of, what the discussion is, the goals, what we're working on. If you're working with someone who's neurodivergent and they really understand the neurodivergent brain, it's going to be a different conversation. It's not just going to be, oh, let's set goals and, help you get motivated. That does nothing for the ADHD brain. So I really believe that whether you decide to take medication or you don't, this piece of behavioral coaching is so important. Find a specialist who can help you with your emotional regulation. When I'm talking to people with ADHD, about half of them, probably more than half, probably about 75%, will say that they do have emotional dysregulation, which can either look like feeling sad and lonely a lot, or being incredibly sensitive, or lashing out and being angry and not being able to control, their behaviors. And then I'll have, probably about 25% that will say, oh no, I don't really deal with that at all. But even if they're not lashing out and they're not, expressive with their emotions, I think that we are all still experiencing emotional dysregulation with ADHD, because it's a lack of self-confidence. It's wanting to be somebody different than who we are. So just keeping that in mind, that piece is so important, whether you're on medication or not. So I think talking to someone that can help you, for example, when I'm working with someone, it's similar to CBT therapy, but it's still a little bit different. And so I can talk to you a little bit about some of the things that I teach someone with ADHD, because part of it is the self-coaching model that really helps you analyze your perspective, and it teaches you how to experience things differently. So I'm not talking about like white knuckling our way through it, like we may sometimes do, or masking. I'm talking about really being able to change the way you experience situations. RSD, rejection sensitivity dysphoria, if you don't know what that is, 2/3 of all adults with ADHD will say that rejection sensitivity dysphoria is the main symptom that they deal with ADHD. So that is extreme rejection, more than the average person. And it's usually the perception of rejection. It's usually the person with RSD is experiencing it much different than it's meant to be experienced. And it can be triggered by constructive criticism, by teasing, the idea that you have not met someone's expectations or not meeting your own expectations. This is a huge deal, rejection sensitivity dysphoria. And many people are aware, even if they're not expressing it outwardly, that the way they're feeling inside is probably a much bigger internal reaction than the average person. So they mask it. Other people do not mask it, and they are throwing, for a better word, lack of a better word, tantrums, slamming things around and blaming other people for the way they feel. And I want to say that my experience is, the more chaotic your life is at the time, or the less healing you've done, the more difficult situation that you're in, the more often these episodes will come, the easier that they're triggered and the longer that they last. And the healthier that you are and the more work you do on yourself, the less you're blaming other people for where you're at in life, the fewer episodes you'll have, and you will be able to get them under control in a much shorter period of time. But the thing with RSD is nobody else can get you out of that. So if you're in an episode, we call it an episode, right? Because that's really what it is. You just start spiraling immediately. It's not helpful for somebody else to try to negotiate with you, talk you through it, calm you down. You have to figure out how to do that on your own. Well, if you don't know how to do that on your own, that's something for behavioral coaching. So that's one side of the coaching. And then when I'm working with someone with ADHD, the other side is understanding your brain. So for example, we live in a world, whether you're going to, even elementary school or college or wherever you are, work, most people, a neurotypical person, can get their brain engaged if the task in front of them is important, or if there's a reward at the end, right? If I get this done early, I get to leave work an hour early. That's utterly useless for somebody with ADHD, because something is important that does nothing for their brain. So we have an acronym that we use in ADHD. And by the way, I didn't create this. I learned this from Dr. Dodson. This is actually used by doctors and specialists, but it's very effective. There's 5 things that can get an ADHD brain engaged. The acronym is NICUP. It's novelty, which is obvious, right? Something new and exciting. Interest, challenge or competition, right? That definitely applies. Somebody, even like elementary school kids, It's like, I bet you can't do that. You want to bet? All of a sudden they can do anything from their math homework, to, running a mountain when they were too tired to do it a second ago. So, and then let's see, novelty, interest, challenger, competition, urgency. So this is the reason if you have ADHD and you have something pressing in front of you, any kind of project, and you just put it off every single day, you can't get yourself to do it. And then at the 11th hour, all of a sudden you can just hyper focus and still do an amazing job getting this thing done. Urgency is not something you can inject artificially. With the other ones we can, but urgency, it's just the way our brain works. And then the last one is passion. So if all five do not have to be present, but one of them does. Every time your ADHD brain is getting involved in something, it's getting engaged and it's staying engaged, it's because one of those five, things was triggered in your brain. So understanding, if the world worked off of NICUP, you would feel completely normal. It just doesn't. If you have ADHD, you have a very capable, usually highly intelligent, creative neurological system that usually ADHDers are changing the world when they have learned how to use ADHD as a superpower. I was telling you earlier, Nick, I love that I have ADHD. It's the reason I've been able to reinvent myself time and time again and raise 6 children on my own for several years before I got remarried. It was awesome for me once I learned how to overcome things like RSD. So I did a lot of talking there, but I think I really think whether you decide to take medication or not, and we can get into that a little bit if you'd like to. I'm well versed in ADHD medication. I think seeing a specialist and getting diagnosed just so you understand your options. We don't want to deal in absolutes. So I don't ever agree with, no, I don't even want to look into that. It's not an option. And I also don't agree with, you have ADHD, you should be on medication. And I can explain that more if you'd like. But the behavioral coaching, I think it's for people who don't have ADHD either. I think that's mandatory. I think all of us should be looking into how to have more emotional regulation.
No, well, thank you for sharing all of that. It's fascinating. And so much in what you just said there. And I think that model, anyone listening, I'll put some resource in there as well. And we'll obviously have them linking to all of your stuff, which I'll go into it later on. But, I think that would be just so useful for anyone to be able to look at. And it's something that I know instantly appeals to me. So that's fascinating. And I want to talk about the medication side of it. Before that, just on the rejection stuff is so interesting, because I don't know if this is true or not, but what I've experienced in myself and other people that I've known that have had similar sort of symptoms has been that sensitivity to rejection, but also living a life where you're almost putting yourself in situations where you're exposed to it more. So for example, my other career's been in the entertainment industry, pursuing acting, and I at one point I had to stop auditioning because I was just getting too anxious with the unknown of it, the rejection, all that sort of stuff. But at the same time, I wanted to do it, and I loved the excitement of it and the idea of it being able to change daily, and so random and things coming up. But that very same thing made me anxious, and I just noticed. I would say, I don't know what the statistics are, but from my own experience, more than half of the actors I met, probably 80%, seemed similar in different ways. So I don't know, is that something does that make sense what I'm saying? Or is that just, I was just really interested about that.
Well, you have to realize too that if you have rejection sensitivity dysphoria, you are automatically going to experience the world in they are doing better in this area. Or, it's interesting because if you just take ADHD out of it for a second and you just look at, they've done a lot of research. And remember, I work a lot with teenagers too. So I'm always fascinated by the statistics of, teenagers today in social media and the mental health crisis that we're having, that's really coming from the comparison of influencers on social media. But it really trickles down into, just to give you an example, and especially with girls, but with boys too. They want to be bodybuilders and they want to look a certain way, or they want to get girls, so they want to look like this or be like that. But girls especially, that they'll idolize influencers But then within the high schools, these girls are dressing like influencers, and they're getting extensions already in high school, and they're having professional makeup done and all the things done that usually adult women are doing, when they can afford it later in their 30s or something like that. And so it's trickling all the way down into schools that, some of these girls can wear what influencers are wearing, but the majority of them can't. And it's leading to self-harm, hating what they look like. Beautiful girls, just because they can't wear a size 0 or 2 with blonde extensions and look like an influencer, and some of the girls at their school can, wanting to end their lives. Social media has such a terrible, impact on our youth. But the reason I bring that up is because the statistics show that when any of us get on social media, 95% of us are getting on to compare ourselves to somebody else, and we're looking to compare ourselves to somebody that's doing better than we are. And that's not just teenagers, that's adults as well. So I think already we're dealing with so much comparison because now we have everything right in front of us. Then you add rejection sensitivity into the mix, where this is just like, sensitivity and rejection on steroids. Most of the time, you're experiencing something that's not actually happening the way that you think it is, but it still feels like rejection. You can't stop it. You might even eventually be able to logically tell yourself, I don't think this is what they meant to do. And you still can't stop the feeling of rejection. So understanding that the fragile self-esteem from ADHD really heightens that sensitivity, and just constantly comparing yourself, believing that you're not doing as well as everybody already anyway. And this is why I take you back to the emotional regulation piece, is that so much of this comes from healing who you are. We can't look to other people, right? Usually, especially if we have rejection sensitivity dysphoria, we're expecting somebody else to change. When you say that to me, this is what I hear. When you do that, this is what I think, right? It's so hard for me when I'm not accepted this way, or I don't make the part, because it almost feels like life is doing this to me, or he or she is doing this to me. And what we want to understand is nobody's doing anything to you. Your thoughts create your feelings, not people. You decide how you feel every second of the day. Feelings aren't outside of us, floating around the room and just kind of falling upon us. We're creating them. Every time you feel anything, it's because you had a thought. It doesn't matter if it's somebody passing away, which I would say is a much bigger life event, or it's somebody cutting you off in traffic. It really is a neutral event until you have a thought about it. And as soon as you have a thought about it, that's where the emotions come in. And because your emotions drive your actions, this is where, all of the behaviors that we later feel so much shame about come into play. So with RSD, even if you're not having a huge episode, which I'm assuming you are, if you feel rejected, at an audition or something like that, you might be in an episode when you come home. But either way, even if it's not a big episode, you're still experiencing these emotions on a much bigger scale than the average person, because you already have so many negative thought pattern errors about who you are and what you can achieve and how life isn't working out for you. So you just really want to, if your readers haven't read up on, and by the way, I'm happy to put a link in there too. I can offer some really great information on RSD.
You're looking to make a change, to lose weight, to get toned, to gain self-confidence, all in just 24 minutes a day, then go no further. You can check out the Move Your Mind community by going to nickbracks.start.page.
If you haven't read on RSD and you think you might have ADHD, I would highly recommend that you do that, because the first step in working through RSD and overcoming it is really understanding it. Because I'll always tell my clients, it's not your personality. When you are triggered and you start lashing out because you feel rejected, this isn't a personality issue. It's not even an anger issue. This is a wiring issue. You have been wired to believe that you're not good enough. A child who has ADHD, by the time they're 10 years old, has heard over 20,000 corrective messages than the average child. You have been conditioned to see yourself this way, to think about yourself this way. So we just need to rewire some things. This is not a personality defect.
Yeah, wow. Yeah, well, thank you for sharing that. I think that's fascinating what you said there. And again, so much in that to unpack, but I love the final message as well, what you said there, that it's a wiring issue. And I think to be able to just remind yourself that, even for me now, when I know that, just to keep reminding yourself, you know what, it's a wiring issue. It's not to do with my personality. It's not to do with me doing the wrong thing or any of these different things. I need to just, look at it that way and work out, how do I rewire? What support do I need to do that? Who can help me? How can I, what can I do? Where can I begin? And it also made sense, I guess, with, like, again, from my own experience, that acting side of it, seeing so many people in that industry that have similar symptoms, like what you're talking about with social media. I guess it's because you're innately feeling like you're not enough. So it's thinking, oh, if I go and become an actor, like that can validate me. And maybe if I get that, and then that'll be my ticket to freedom, and it'll just all unfold naturally, and people will support me then, and all these things that you can't feel a void of yourself, you're thinking that's all going to be solved. Because I've just seen that so many times, it just sort of made sense. So I guess we're looking for magical solutions. And, I know I lived a lot of my life in fantasy, projecting all these fantasies, taking me out of reality. Is that another big thing that people do?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I definitely think so. And I wanted to just speak real quickly to something you were saying, and you've probably noticed this, is that I think that really, like, the lack of joy and unfulfillment in our lives is being where we are and wishing we were somewhere else. And this is something that I see not just with ADHDers. I've done behavioral coaching for a long time. I didn't go down I call it the ADHD rabbit hole, because I wasn't diagnosed until later in life. I didn't really focus on ADHD until a little bit later, after I had I had a son who attempted suicide. And the thing is even with clients who don't have ADHD, that's we're always just in that hamster wheel of believing, if I can just get this thing, then I'll be happy. If I can just, whatever it is, right? Get the car, get the spot that I auditioned for, have the money, get the job, then I'll finally be happy. And that's not actually where happiness comes from. Happiness is a mindset. And so we want to learn to change the way that we think about that. Because of course, you think about it, Nick, if we believe, for example, and we all do this, right? Like anything I talk about, I'm guilty of, I did most of my life. But if we believe, if I can just get this part, I can finally be happy, then we're coming from a place of desperation, right? And when we're coming from a place of scarcity, there's also immediately, I'm a big believer in energy, a negative energy that comes from that. Right off the bat, if you're coming from scarcity rather than abundance, you already are like, you don't have the advantage that you have if you're someone who's coming from a place of abundance, who believes, I already have everything I need. Like, I don't need this, I want it. And I always tell my clients, there's a difference between needing and wanting. Wanting is very healthy. I want a girlfriend, I want a new job, I want a car, I want money, I want this audition to go well. That's great. We should want things all day long. But when we need it, a need comes from an internal pain. I need this to be happy. I need this to be proud of myself. I need this to believe in myself. That's unhealthy. And I tell my clients, there's actually nothing you absolutely need to or have to do. You don't have to pay. Things are different in Australia, I know, but like, you don't need to take care of your children if you have children. I mean, I think there's always going to be consequences, right? You could have them taken away, but you don't have to. You could lie in bed all day and you could just do whatever you wanted to. You don't have to pay your taxes. You just don't. You could just decide to not pay them. There'll be consequences eventually, but everything we do is a choice, right? And so understanding that, first of all, we don't need to or have to do anything, and we don't need these things to feel happy. And if our brain is telling us, I need this, and then I can prove to myself, that already is a thought pattern error. We don't need it. And if we need it, instead of shaming ourselves, we want to be curious about it. Why do I believe that I need this to be happy? That's where the emotional regulation piece really comes in, is helping us kind of unravel that and rewire that, so that we are learning how to earn self-confidence from ourselves, not putting the pressure that if I have this thing, I'll be happy, and if I don't, it must mean I'm a failure. That's a very unhealthy way of thinking, and it just leads to a constant cycle of shame.
Yeah, that's fascinating. That makes a lot of sense. And just being able to, put it through that filter would really help when you're looking at situations, and help you to, even if it might be something you don't feel like doing, to realize, no, you know what, I do want to do that. It might be painful and uncomfortable, but I want to do it because if I don't do my taxes, there's going to be all of these consequences. I don't want that. I do want to have like a life that is honest and that is, operational and sustainable. So I think that's a really, really useful filter. So I love
Well, real quickly, the reason I bring up that example is so many people come into my office complaining about that. Well, I have to do it because my ex-husband's not going to do it. My ex-wife's not going to do it. So I have to do it. I have to do this. I have to drive my kids around. I have to pay for this. I'm like, no, you don't. No, you don't. You're choosing to do it because you're a good person, because you care about your kids, because you care about your future. You don't have to do anything. It really changes our mindset when we want our autonomy, right? Especially ADHDers. We want our autonomy, helping people realize that no, everything you do is a choice. You don't have to do these things. Yeah, that's kind of stinks if somebody else isn't doing their part, but you are doing it because of who you are, not because you have to. I just always want help people to help shift their thinking to see the good person that they are. And usually we're complaining about the bad people other people are, like they're doing this to me, or they didn't give me the part, or they're making my life hard. And it's like, yeah, but you're choosing this because of who you are. Let's focus on that. It just feels better. Like if you have the choice to choose one or the other to think all day, which one feels better? How does it make you feel? How does it help you show up? And so I'm grossly oversimplifying the process, but it just gives an example of we can learn regardless of what's going on around us every moment of the day, to choose the way that we feel and to choose to feel the fulfilling, to have the feelings that give us the fulfilling life that we're looking for.
Absolutely. And there's empowerment in that. And, that example you're saying about you might have a partner and they're not taking responsibility, you're doing everything, this isn't fair, why do I have to do everything? Well, it's like the second part of that could be, well, I'm a good person, I want to do everything. Sure, I'm going to do that, but I don't have to stay with this partner. Like if it's not working, I can set a boundary, I can have a conversation. If they don't respect my boundary enough times, well, okay, that's telling me it's not the right relationship. But I think we get stuck thinking, no, we have to change other people, which we can't do. So it's like, yeah.
Right. And also ADHDers, many times, because our emotions, when we're up, but when we're down, and we're doing this all the time, which also can create a lot of irritability because there's so much energy output when it comes to up and down and up and down. But also generally speaking, I mean, I feel like ADHD is much like autism, that it's a spectrum. So there's never going to be just one symptom that hits everybody the same. But generally speaking, because we tend to be more emotional, we don't like to be alone. It's really hard for us. The rejection sensitivity kicks in. And so we also justify staying in situations that aren't healthy and then feeling resentful that the person isn't doing what we want them to do, instead of realizing like it's really hard to change ourselves. It's almost impossible to change other people. So we just have to decide what we want to make it mean and what we want to do about it, that somebody doesn't behave the way we want them to, rather than get emotionally charged and try to get them to change or blame them for our feelings. So it's a really interesting conversation, but I think, empowering people to be able to make those decisions and just really understanding, just so your audience knows, rejection sensitivity can feel so intense that it can feel like an internal wound. Before I knew, in my 20s, I had no idea. I'm going to be 50 in a couple of years. Before I knew that I had rejection sensitivity dysphoria, I just knew how I reacted to things. I mean, I felt a little bit crazy. I would explain it as I was being clawed from the inside out. It was so painful. And I don't know if you wanted to talk about medication, but I did have some information I'd like to share about RSD if you wanted to do that.
Yeah, please. I finished with 5 closing questions, which we'll go into, but before that, I'd love to hear the medication part.
Well, I mean, and we don't have to get too deep into medication, but most people know that, ADHD, there's stimulant medication and there are non-stimulant medication choices as well. And I just wanted to put out there that I used to be very anti-medication. I love holistic healing. I see an integrative medicine doctor. I had very strong feelings. And I think if somebody would have come into my office just 5 years ago, I would have definitely advised them, do not put a child on ADHD medication. It's dangerous. My 29-year-old daughter, I knew she had ADHD when she was young, and I never put her on medication. I just didn't know enough. But, the thing is I feel very differently now, because when you see the struggles, like some of my own children, for example, it's so extreme. They have to be on medication to lead normal lives. And then I started working with a lot of kids, and there were kids like 3rd, 4th, 5th grade that were getting kicked out of school after school, didn't have a single friend, not invited ever to a birthday party. And then they get on medication, and it's like, everything about this, especially males, especially boys in the school system. I mean, this is so hard for them, right? They're taking, they have less and less PE. They're being taught primarily by, at least here in the US, by women. They're expected to sit still, not get out of their seat, like all the things that don't work for ADHD learning environment. And they're getting in a lot of trouble. These kids, they could not function. And then they get on medication, and it's like for the first time in their life, they don't feel depressed. They're able to sit through class. But by the way, there's just as many people that don't need medication. Even within my own family, half of us are on medication and half of us aren't.
Yep.
The reason I wanted to bring it up for rejection sensitivity dysphoria is that if you have audience members that are against medication, and again, I don't believe in absolutes. I just don't. I have a sister-in-law who, her family, she cuts out dyes and sugar, and she swears that it works. And the majority of my clients have tried all of that, and it doesn't work for them. So it works for a small, minority of people, and that's great, but it's different for everyone. The reason I was diagnosed is my sister was diagnosed with a binge eating disorder, and then found out it was associated with ADHD. And that's how our entire family got diagnosed. So my teenager, who was suicidal and was on antidepressants and they weren't doing anything for him, had ADHD, and we had no idea. When it comes to rejection sensitivity dysphoria, there are 2 medications that are used to treat it. And what I find is that most specialists do not recommend these to my clients. And so I think it's an important conversation. I always ask, when somebody has seen a doctor, what did they recommend for your rejection sensitivity dysphoria? And if they recommend a separate medication, I know, okay, they're working with someone who knows what they're doing. So you don't take both, you take one or the other. One is guanfacine. And by the way, I have resources for these too, if you want to put the link in there. And one is clonidine. And they were made to be blood pressure medications, and they do not work well to stabilize your blood pressure. It's kind of an accident that they stumbled upon that they treat RSD. The reason I like people to know this is because if they are hesitant to take stimulant medication, this is a very mild medication. It is not a stimulant medication. And its primary objective is to hit RSD symptoms. So it helps soften and reduce impulsivity. It usually helps one to sleep a lot better because many ADHDers struggle with sleep. In fact, clonidine has a sedative period of 3 to 4 hours after you take it, but both of them, I get a good night's rest on either one. And then also it really reduces the sensitivity to RSD. So, and we're talking 1 to 3 milligrams, very mild, treats RSD. And you could, if you're seeing a specialist, they're going to recommend that you take that with a stimulant medication because stimulant medication hits the ADHD symptoms, but you could just take that on its own if you're just focusing on the emotional dysregulation.
Interesting. Yeah, well, thank you for sharing that. And like you're saying, such a complicated area, but everything you're talking about there we'll share in the show notes. Where can we send people? We'll have all of this in the show notes, but where can we send them if they want to find out this information?
Sure, you can just send them to my website. Unfortunately, my name is difficult to spell, but it's JheriSouth.com. And from my website, by the way, I have a free webinar on rejection sensitivity dysphoria, and I go into how to help with the emotional dysregulation. That's also where you can find the free test that you can take to find out if you have ADHD. And then I have lots of free resources that I give for these kinds of things. You can also send me a private message. You can sign up for a free consult if you're interested in one-on-one coaching. And then I have an ADHD course with 4 hours of interview with Dr. Dodson split up into bite-sized, it's ADHD friendly because I have ADHD too, right? It's interesting. It's informative. I go through everything and anything you want to know about ADHD. And the course is $97. I mean, it's like it took me 100 hours to put together. So that really just covers my marketing costs. And it's great because ADHDers, their short-term memory, we struggle to remember things. Then you have it there forever. It's all broken up into chapters. So anything you want to know from medication or myths versus facts, or, I know this is primarily males, but I have a chapter just on estrogen. And then I also talk about NICUP in detail that I mentioned earlier. I talk about how to overcome procrastination, how to create an owner's manual. I have some things that you can print off and use. And then I go all into the emotional management and dysregulation that I work one-on-one with my clients. So it's a great value. So all of those things can be found on my website.
Are you interested in joining a community of like-minded people who are on the same journey as you are? Even though you're the one that needs to do the work, you don't have to go it alone. You can find all of the information at nickbracks.start.page. Amazing. Well, we'll have the links in the show notes, so make sure to click on those, check it all out. Thank you so much for that. I finish every episode just with 5 closing questions. These can be just quick answers, whatever comes to mind for you.
Sure.
First one is, what's your best childhood memory that comes to mind?
Oh, goodness. Okay, so, well, if I tell you, then I have to admit that I did pageants when I was younger. But my mom put us in pageants. It was a talent-based pageant. I always tell everybody. But I wish it wasn't so superficial. But I was 12 years old and I won this huge competition with 50 girls, and it was primarily on talent. And I had worked for 2 years to really, immediately wasn't great on stage. I learned to be good on stage. I really came out of my shell, and I won a cruise to the Bahamas, and I won $1,000. And there was in Vegas, a huge theater full of people. And to this day, I think that was the most exhilarating moment of my life, because I was so proud of myself. And it was something that I never in a million years could have pictured myself doing. And I want to mention, my sister had won in previous years and I hadn't ever done very well. And then I won. And so I don't ever talk about this. It's almost like I have never have any reason to talk about this. It's making me a little bit emotional, but it was in that moment that my mindset started to change about myself, realizing maybe I can do anything, at 12 years old, maybe I can. So there was an emotional, right? With ADHDers, everything's tied to an emotion. That was a big change for me. Yeah.
That's great. No, thank you for sharing that. What do you think's currently the biggest burden on mental health in society?
Oh, goodness. Oh, well, where do I start? I don't know. That's hard to really narrow down. For one thing, I look at, I feel like in every other area of health in general, like in medicine, we're advancing. It's incredible. But in mental health, I feel like we're going backwards. So I feel like there's a lot of things that are contributing to that. Maybe, I don't know what kind of training people are getting. I feel like I have teenagers that come and see me, and they're working with younger generation therapists who are telling them it's okay if you cut, as long as you don't cut too deep. And they're also having a large influence. I don't like that we have therapists and counselors telling people what they should do. I think we should be empowering people to make their own decisions. So I think that, and then I think what we're talking about I actually think social media, I love technology and where it's gotten us, but I actually think it's been detrimental to this generation. And one of the reasons I think is, kids are growing up knowing way too much about everybody's business. And so it's like people are scared to get married because they're looking around them and everybody's getting divorced. They're looking online and everybody has a better life than they do. Everyone's going on vacations or has more money, in their mind than they do. And I think that we just kind of live in this world now where everybody's just on screens and everything, really it's not real. And it seems like we can't catch up.
Hey guys, if you're enjoying this podcast, please click the subscribe button, leave a like or comment, share with your friends, and follow me on Instagram at nickbracks. I really appreciate your ongoing support.
And help the mental health of this up and coming generation, because it's just happening so quickly. It keeps me up at night trying to figure out every day there's a new problem in my office. And it's like, this is heavy. This is deep. How do we undo a lot of the damage that's been done, of comparison? And also one other thing I would say is, because we're so behind with where we've gotten with technology, we should be teaching mind management and emotional regulation and behavioral coaching in every school. That it should be accessible to everybody, and kids aren't learning it today. Most adults haven't learned it either. So that's where I'm up at night trying to figure out how we can do better.
Totally agree. What's your personal definition of happiness?
This is fun. This is an interesting question. So for me, I separate the word happiness and joy, because I work so much with emotional dysregulation and people buffering the pain. The buffering is the word I use when we turn to something else, when we are trying to avoid how we feel. So I think of happiness as short-term gratification, eating a bowl of ice cream, smoking, drinking, pornography, whatever it may be. It brings us some instant happiness, but it doesn't fulfill us in any way long-term. And I think of joy coming from fulfillment that we get from life. And I believe the difference between being successful and being fulfilled always have a long way. I have ADHD, you guys. I have a long way of answering every question. But I think of success as, making money, starting a business, really feeling like you can buy the car, or, but it's, when you get here, then there's just another group of problems. Like, it doesn't matter how successful we become, right? Life is always pretty much 50-50. But when I think about true joy, I think about life being fulfilling. And I personally believe that fulfillment comes from our relationships. It comes from, the people in our lives, and it comes from whatever it is that we're putting into the world to make a difference. And I think that that's where true joy really comes from, our connections and what we're giving back into the world.
Absolutely. I love that answer. So I've got two more here. If you could give one piece of advice to your 18-year-old self, what would that be?
Just one. Don't go on the date, right? And there was a man. That's gosh, I really need to think about this one. So just so that you know, I was a single mother by the time I was 18 years old.
Wow.
And I made some decisions that got me there, right? And I kind of had a rough upbringing, and I did find success, but by the time I was about 20 years old, and, I was doing pretty well, but I think that, honestly, I would want myself to understand that I had ADHD. If that's what it really boils down to, if I could give myself advice, gosh, I think, there's just so many things that happened around that time of my life. I think it would be to really rely more on my intuition and who I believed I could become. It took me a long time to realize that the opinions of others and the strengths of others didn't have anything to do with me. I took things so hard, and I believed the opinions of others. And the reason that matters is, especially being a single mom, there was a lot, there's even within my own family, she's never going to do this, she's never going to do that, and I really believed that about myself for a long time. And I finally realized, that, like, every decision we make, you've heard decisions determine destiny, but I really think that the first decision we make about anything is what we're going to think about it, what we're going to believe. I think I would go back and tell myself, believe in yourself. Because other people aren't going to believe in you. All they see is what's going on the outside. And with ADHD, there's a lot going on, but nobody can see what's going on the inside except for you. And I think deep down, we know who we are and we know who we're capable of, but we let so much of the outside influence affect us. And there's so much unrealized potential because we let all the noise get in, and we believe it's too hard. I can't do it. I don't have the training. I don't have this. I don't have that. Instead of just really focusing on what we know about ourselves, like getting more in tune with that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, another great answer. So final one for you. What are you most proud of?
Being a mother.
Love it. Love it.
Yeah. Having 7 children, and, I've always worked. I've had to work, and now I love to work. And I've had a lot of hats. I've been an airline trainer, and I've had my own radio show, and I've done a lot in real estate. And now I get to work with people in this capacity. But there is nothing that has been as fulfilling or rewarding in life as being a mother to my 7 children.
I love it. Well, yeah, thank you so much for making the time. And I think, like I said at the beginning, we could probably talk for 10 hours. I'll have to have you on for round 2 and round 3.
I would love it.
Really enjoyed it. So thank you for making the time. Love what you're doing, and would love to stay in touch.
Thank you so much, Nick. I'm happy to come back anytime, and I'll make sure to send all of those resources to your guests. Anything else I can do to help you, just reach out and let me know. This has been great, a great conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jheri South, for joining me today and offering your insights. And thank you for listening. I'd love to hear your thoughts about the episode and any suggestions for topics you'd like to hear about. Feel free to leave a comment or just send a DM. Your feedback's always appreciated. Please don't forget to click the subscribe button, leave a like or comment, share with your friends, and follow me on Instagram. It really makes a difference. Thank you so much.